Hello everyone and welcome to the Dragyn's Den. Pull up a seat near the fire. You've got your choice of coffee, tea, or hot chocolate, and let's dive in to today's topic. Finally moving on from Dungeons and Dragons, I'm moving on to something that's been a really important part of my life in the last few months, and bear with me, it may not be the most exciting thing to hear about, but it's really important to me, so I want to just get my 15 minutes, well, we'll see, probably longer than 15 minutes in about Toastmasters. Now, I bet not a lot of you have heard about Toastmasters, so I'm going to go into the program a little bit with you guys, what it is, how it's a club format, the structure, the formalities, the roles, the speeches, the evaluations, and there's a lot that is involved when it comes to Toastmasters, and man, there's a lot to go into, so I'm going to just get started. So what is Toastmasters? Toastmasters is an organization that is present around the world in over 140 countries. So yes, there's probably a Toastmasters club in your area or near you. I recommend looking into it, but maybe I should explain it first before I recommend it. Toastmasters is an organization that was created to help people with their various speaking and communication skills, but it goes beyond that. It goes beyond public speaking. There are many different goals and things that you can accomplish and work on through Toastmasters. For example, they've got a Pathways education program where you can choose what path you want to go down and if it's something you want to work on. So for myself, I'm in Toastmasters here in my local city. We are meeting online, of course, due to the world situation, and we meet once a week every Saturday, and we go through the meeting process, and we all are on our own pathways, our own paths basically. There's so many to choose from, so I'm not going to go into all of them, but I'll provide a few examples for you. You can sign up for a presentation mastery pathway, for example, where you work on developing and creating presentations in an effective manner to send a message to whoever you are presenting to. Maybe you have a job that requires you to stand in front of a room and deliver updates or deliver some sort of speech, and you need to give a presentation. Well, that pathway would be for you. And there's also the pathway I'm on called Motivational Strategies. This pathway is to help motivate others and to basically to build relationships, keep them, motivate others, support people, and network, and just really create meaningful connections. So as you can see, between those two paths, there's already a lot of differences. We go through the same structure, so to kind of lay it out for you, there are 5 levels in each pathway, and in each level you have to do a certain amount of speeches or take on a certain role or do an elective or a big project. So there is a lot to do. I've been part of Toastmasters since September, October, and I am only working through the rest of level 2 now. So there is a lot to go through, a lot to learn, and it can be quite overwhelming to begin with. But it's a good thing for many people. For me, it's good because I do want to form connections and meet more people locally and really take on this motivational strategies role. I've looked deep down into my pathway and it's really exciting to see the different options you can choose. Sometimes you don't get an option, which is not very fun, but it challenges you. So you get to do something or learn something that maybe you would never have done in your life. So I'm looking forward to what this pathway has in store for me. There's also like there's engaging humor as a pathway as well. So working on your sense of humor. Who would have thought that would be something you could work on. There's a program and a pathway for humor. Toastmasters really does have a little bit of everything, so I encourage you to maybe take a peek at it and see if you can find a meeting to sit in on, and read, watch some videos, and you'll be surprised to see how the system works. I know when I first joined it, I thought it would be a very casual, chill speaking club, almost like a book club, where you gather, you look at something over the course of the week, and then you meet together and talk about it. No. It's way different than that. It's much more formal, much more structured. So it is a lot to take on. So if you do have quite a busy life, it may not be for you right at this moment. But if you've got some time and you feel like you need to work on something, maybe check it out. Now let's actually go into a typical Toastmasters meeting. Now, depending on where you are in the world and how it works, it could look a little differently than what I've been experiencing, so bear that in mind. As you know, there's different languages, cultures, and different topics that one can present on, so it's not going to be the exact same for every club, but this is the basic structure. In Toastmasters clubs, we've got presidents, we've got the vice president of education, we've got directors, we have sergeant of arms. There are many elective roles. So these are more of the people for our executive roles. So these are the people that are really into Toastmasters, have been in it for years, and have volunteered to help run the club from like the behind the scenes kind of a situation. These people play an important role because they organize each meeting, they prepare the agendas, they prepare the educational part of Toastmasters for all of us. So when the meeting begins, we all jump in on Zoom, as everything is digital on Zoom right now, and we have a sergeant of arms. Now their role is very important. They keep us on time because before the meeting, we do like to chat and catch up and check in and see how everybody is doing and if they are ready for the meeting, because there are speeches in each meeting, which I'll get to. So without the sergeant of arms, we would probably always start late. So the sergeant of arms, their role is to make sure we start right on time. They will give us a lot of reminders about how the meeting is structured, and at some clubs they will share the club promise with everybody, just to remind us like why we are here, our purpose, and what we aim to do at every meeting. Then they go into and explain how things work in the meeting. So for my club, we have different sections of the meeting, and they will go through each section and explain it. Then they will also remind us that voting is a part of Toastmasters, so you get to vote for your favorite speaker, your favorite tabletop speaker, and your favorite evaluator, which is really neat. So it kind of gives us a bit of a confidence boost where we need it. It's really neat that way. They will also explain that in the meeting there are evaluations for prepared speeches. So there is usually somewhere between 1 to 3 speeches a meeting, and these people are doing speeches based on their path. They basically get to deliver their speeches, and then after we have a bit of fun with table topics, which again, I'll explain all this as we kind of go, and then we get to the evaluation part, where people volunteer to be an evaluator, and they'll sit down with their piece of paper or open a document on their computer and fill out feedback for the speaker, so they know what they did really, really well, what they could work on, and what to challenge them with. I think that's a really great structure. I love it a lot for that feedback. So the Sergeant of Arms basically goes through all of that with us at the beginning of the meeting. Then they introduce our president. So each club has a president, and ours is quite corny and hilarious, and he's definitely a lot of fun, but his job, when it gets to his role, is to host a business meeting. And it's kind of weird that there's a business meeting as part of this club, but it's important because then we get to know about what's coming up, who our new members are. We can induct our new members into the club, and we can kind of decide if there will be a meeting during the holidays or not, and it's that kind of important part of the club. So it plays a very important role. He also gets us to introduce ourselves. So we go one by one. He gives us a little bit of a prompt, and it's usually based on a theme or a topic, basically. The introductions that are ran by the president are nothing too long or crazy. It's usually stating your name and then responding to the prompt. So for example, hello, my name is Dragyn, and time flies when I am recording a podcast. Nothing too intense, just a little one-liner for everybody to kind of learn a bit more about each other in the most simplest ways, which I really like. After we go through the business meeting, the introductions, and getting through all those formalities, the president will sometimes make a statement about the theme or about the club, and after all that, he announces the leading Toastmaster for the meeting. The Toastmaster has a big role. If you think of a wedding or a different kind of event, there's always a master of ceremonies or a host. That's basically what the Toastmaster does for the meeting. They are hosting it, they're organizing it, they are making sure that every single part of the meeting goes according to schedule and plan. The Toastmaster role is very fun. I have not done it yet myself, but I've been observing and writing down notes, and one day I'll take up the podium and being a Toastmaster myself. We'll see. But this is the important part. They really kick off the meeting. So with every Toastmasters meeting, or most Toastmaster meetings, you've got 4 parts to the meeting. You've got the introductions and business meeting with the president. Then we move on to prepared speeches. So like I said before, there's usually 1 to 3 depending on where people are in the programs and if we have enough people to do it. Then, so business meeting, prepared speeches. Usually we take a break there. That's a nice halfway point. Then we jump into table topics and then evaluations. So 4 parts to every meeting, and the Toastmaster's job is to make sure we do all 4 parts. What's really great for the Toastmasters that I've seen so far is that they are really organized. They will reach out to you via email or a phone call, ask for a few things, some information from you, especially if you are giving a speech or you are taking on a specific role, which I'll get to in a bit about roles. They'll reach out to you, get some information, and they usually ask you for a more longer, lengthy introduction so they can introduce you as you do your role or your speech. So they will basically explain all that, and then they'll call upon their helpers. So in every Toastmasters meeting, or most Toastmaster meetings, we have helpers. So these people have a different kind of role than just sitting in and listening in. We have the all counter, who their main job is to have a piece of paper with every member's name on it, and their job is to count how many filler words we use, or how many sentences that, we could have used a break instead of saying and, those kinds of things. So they will actually count how many of those we use in the meeting, the entire meeting, and they report their findings at the end. This is the coolest role that I've discovered in this entire process in Toastmasters in general. You really begin to be aware of your filler words very quickly, especially when you hear that you've used like 6 or 7 in like one section of the meeting. You're like, oh, that's not good. It's something I've become a lot aware of, and I think if you've noticed in the podcast, I try to get rid of those fillers. You don't hear them. I actually don't use them a lot, but I will use other words instead of ums and ahs and ands. I think you've heard me say it already. I tend to use a lot. So that is a filler word. That is something to kind of keep track of and try to eliminate from your daily language, because it makes it sound a little less formal, and it does make it sound like you don't know what you're doing. A little bit. And there's other reasons why people use it, because they lose their train of thought, English isn't their first language, or something just comes up, or maybe there's a stutter. So a lot of people like hearing that feedback so they can see if they are improving over time or not. I'm actually really impressed that I don't have many filler words to use. I think that probably comes from my teaching training and having to be in that professional role most of my life, or most of my 3-year career so far. So I think that helps quite a bit. Whereas others, it just happens. I said, again. I caught it. Ah! Anyway. So there's the all counter, a very important role, and something that you'd be interested in listening for yourselves. You'd be surprised at how many attempts you use to kind of extend your time when speaking. So maybe that might be worth checking out yourselves. Who knows? Then there is a grammarian. I love the grammarian. What they do for Toastmasters meetings is present a word of the day. So it's some sort of new word, and basically their job is to give the word of the day, define it, and provide examples of how to use the word. Then they spend the meeting tracking how many times that word is used throughout the meeting by everybody. And they also keep track of very unique, interesting, and proper uses of English, as well as reporting on some not so correct English phrases. So they play a very important role as well. They will comment on people's sentence structure, if they are using a lot of past tense instead of present tense, or active voice instead of passive voice, those kinds of things. So obviously for me, as an English teacher, I'm very good at this role. I notice the little things all the time, and I'm constantly internally cringing, but on the outside I'm actively listening, nodding my head, saying, yes, I understand, keep going, that's great. I'm very encouraging, but there are times inside where I'm like, why did they use that word? So grammarians are really important to the meeting as well. A few of the other roles we have is, of course, Toastmasters, so I already explained their role. We have the president, which, again, he's been explained. The sergeant of arms as well, starts the meeting, reminds us of things to be aware of during the meeting, and their club promise. Then we have a timer. This is the part of Toastmasters that is a little scary for most people. Part of the Pathways education program with Toastmasters is you have to give timed speeches. You can't just take the whole hour and a half for your own speech. Doesn't quite work that way, unfortunately. Most speeches are between 5 to 7 minutes or 4 to 6 minutes, and we have a timer for that, and their role is important. So if you are given a 5 to 7 minute speech, for example, their job is to start the timer when you begin, and when you hit the 5-minute mark, they hold a green card up, or a green colored something basically, saying, hey, careful, you're reaching your time, you might want to try wrapping it up. Then at the 6-minute mark, they'll hold a yellow card or a yellow object. And that's when it's like, alright, you are nearing the end of your time, wrap it up, basically. And then at 7 minutes, red card, which means you gotta stop talking at this point. Wrap it up quickly if you can. So they play a really good role. It is really challenging, by the way, to write a speech in 5 to 7 minutes. This is something I'll probably go into quite a bit after I go through this setup here. As, oh man, most of my speeches I want to go over that 7-minute mark. I just have so much to say. That's why I do podcasts, where I can go for as long as I want and ramble as long as I want, and there's no timer for me, so it's good. However, in the meeting, timers are the best and sometimes the most nerve-wracking people to deal with. That's why I like being a timer, where I don't have to worry too much. Aha! So yes, Toastmaster, President, Sergeant of Arms. We've got our timer, all counter, Grammarian. Now then we have our speakers. So their role in the meeting is just to deliver their speech in the given time. That is their role. Scary, intimidating, not always fun, especially if you don't feel prepared, but it's the best way to learn in Toastmasters. When you get to do a speech, that is the moment where you know if you have sunk or shone, if you've risen above or you didn't quite hit the mark. It is a really good opportunity. A lot of people are nervous to sign up to be a speaker. However, it is the best way to learn. As not only do we have speakers, we have the evaluators. So if there are 2 speakers in the meeting, we'll have 2 evaluators, and they will be looking at a specific evaluation form for the project or the speech that they have to do for their pathway. And their job is to write down the feedback from the speech. They look at things like eye contact. Online world, that's really, really hard for a lot of people to do, because our instinct is to look at the webcam faces on the screen. So if you've ever been in a Zoom call, you know what I mean. You want to look at the person's face. However, the proper eye contact that you need to do is actually look at the webcam, because when your feed is being streamed to the others, it looks like you're looking at someone right in the eyes. So when we do Zoom meetings like this, we have to look at the webcam, which basically means you do need to have your speeches pretty much memorized, or you can use little tips and tricks to get around it. My tip and trick, I have a sticky note that I put right underneath my webcam, so that I've got my main points for my speech on that sticky note underneath my webcam. So if I do stumble a little bit or I forget something, I can just take a moment and look at the camera or my sticky note and not skip a beat. It's a nice little trick, so I recommend that for you guys if you have to do online interviews or meetings with anybody. Sticky note underneath your camera. Problem solved. So they look at eye contact. They also look at vocal variety. A good speech means you have your dips and your highs in your speech. If you really want to emphasize something, or if you want to let them in on a little secret, there's that vocal variety that captures the audience and it keeps them engaged, which is also something they look at. Audience engagement. Are people looking and listening and are actively nodding or agreeing with what you're saying? Or are they distracted by other things and looking at their phone because they're bored? So there's that engagement that they look at too. They also look at how prepared you are. It's very obvious how prepared someone is. If you are reading your speech word for word on your screen, or if you're looking down at your notes the entire time and delivering your speech that way, you're most likely not prepared as much as you should be. A prepared speech is where you can tell that someone knows enough about their speech and their content when they are pretty much looking at the camera for 80 to 90% of the time. It's a big challenge, guys. It is. It's not easy to memorize a speech. And there are so many ways to memorize a speech, which I'll definitely get into if you guys are sold by this point and get into Toastmasters. I'll give you some tips and tricks before you even get in a meeting, so you're welcome. But yes, we have evaluators that give really, really good feedback about all these different things. If you're a good evaluator and you understand the role very well, you would also reach out to the speaker before the meeting and ask them if there's anything in particular they want you to look for. So for me, I was giving a speech about some research I had to do. I had to pick a topic basically that I knew nothing about and present it. I always get nervous when I do something like that because first, it's a topic you're unfamiliar with. There's no set parameters for the research, and you gotta just find a structure somehow. So I was really nervous about it. So I reached out to my evaluator and said, hey, I want to make sure that I've got good vocal variety so that I'm delivering my research in a way that's not monotone or boring. And sure enough, he looked at that. He said, no way. Your speech was not boring at all. You used a lot of gestures, and you were looking at the camera. You really emphasized certain points, like 10,000 years ago was something I emphasized. And they gave really good feedback because they knew that I was looking for it, and I needed that. So evaluators, if you're a good evaluator, that's what you would do. Reach out to the speaker before the meeting, get the evaluation form from them, and ask them, is there anything in particular or specifically that I can look at to help you in this process? And that way, everyone in Toastmasters, every member, is very supportive, very, very supportive, welcoming, encouraging people. You'll find the most amazing group of people in your life if you join Toastmasters. The littlest things you don't even realize about yourself that they really emphasize and highlight to you. It's just amazing. So, evaluators are rocks in meetings, basically. They give you a lot of feedback. But it doesn't stop there. We've got the speakers, the speaker evaluators. We also have a general evaluator. They've got a big role in this meeting. They have to report their feedback about the entire meeting. They have to give feedback on the Toastmaster themselves. They have to give feedback to the other evaluators and let them know how well they did, as well as giving feedback to the roles as well, like the odd counter, timer, grammarian as well. They have a big role. They need to be very attentive and watch everything in the meeting. And it's funny, as the timer has to time evaluations. Most evaluations are 2 to 3 minutes. The general evaluator has to give his speech or his feedback in the same amount of time for the entire meeting. It is a challenge. So if that's something that you want to try to do for yourself, by all means go ahead. I have not done general evaluator yet. I think those are the only 2 roles I haven't done yet. Toastmaster and general evaluator. I gotta do it one day. So that is the second part of the meeting, is the speeches being delivered. So we all sit there and we listen, and the Sergeant of Arms, in my group at least, in my club, they encourage us to give feedback after each speech in the chat box. So what's nice about Zoom is you can pick someone, instead of just writing your feedback to everyone, you can look for the person's name and give them specific feedback, which is really nice. So you not only are you getting feedback from the evaluator for your speech, you're getting feedback from everyone. And that's what I mean by Toastmasters being a very supportive group for you. They're not here to see you fail. They're not here to criticize you and really bring you down and make you upset. That's not their job. They're here to lift you up, encourage you, and really let you know what you've done well. You'll find you may find similar groups like this that would do that for you, and you may have had really good teachers before that has done the same thing, etc. But Toastmasters is just something special, where you know that every time you log on, everyone in that call, everyone in that group wants to see you succeed. It's a very rare thing to find in your life. It's something I very, very, very much appreciate, as we are our own worst critics. I have given speeches, obviously, at this point, and I will feel like I don't deserve Best Speaker. I don't deserve to win anything. That was awful. What was I doing? But then the feedback you get, you're like, oh, wait a minute. My goal for that speech was met. Everyone got engaged. Everyone had something to say. Everyone wanted to play D&D after when I gave a D&D speech. Yes, I had to bring up D&D one more time, guys. Hi. I did give a speech on D&D. I gave 2 speeches on D&D. That's how much I love it. Anyway, hear more in previous episodes. But yeah, you'll never find a more supportive group in your life. So that's really cool as well. Everyone will give feedback to everybody for their speeches. It's really good. So outside of the speeches, we take a break in the meeting. That's usually our halfway point in the meeting. We take a little 5 to 10 minute break, and we come back and we do table topics. I love table topics so much. You're gonna question why I like table topics very soon when I explain it. But I personally love it. There's so many times in your life where you're being asked questions on the spot and you have to have a response. Table topics helps with that. It is the impromptu speaking part of our meeting. So we have a table topics master. That's another role that you can do in Toastmasters, where you take the theme for the meeting or the topic and you come up with very simple questions that are a bit more than yes or no. Well, so what I mean by that is you create a series of questions, 4 to 6 questions usually. There's not a whole lot of time for table topics. And you prepare them ahead of time, and when it comes to be your turn, that role, you have to explain why table topics is important, how it can be used in your daily life, and then you get the Table Topics Evaluator to explain what they are looking for. Yes, there is an evaluator for impromptu speaking, which makes it sound extremely scary, more scary than just being called upon randomly to answer a question. You're also being evaluated for your answer. But that's how we learn. That's how you grow. So that Table Topic Evaluator is so important. They will explain usually that they're looking for a very clear opening, a body, and a conclusion. So your answer to the question has to cover those 3 things. They will also look for, again, the same things that an evaluator for a speaker would look for. Eye contact, gestures, facial expressions, those things as well. Table Topics is unique. You only have basically 1 minute to 2 minutes to answer the question. So it's not a full-on speech, but it's long enough to give a very full and complete answer. For example, I was asked in my very first meeting, when was there a moment in your life that you felt welcomed? It's questions like that. So obviously the theme for me was welcome, and they spun a question based on that theme. I was nervous to do that, but I basically very quickly, back in September, I talk really fast. I'm so nervous. When I'm nervous, I speak fast. If you think I'm a fast speaker right now, during the podcast, I assure you, when I'm under pressure, it's basically rapid fire and it goes really quickly and I don't know what I'm doing. Like that. But yeah, I had that opening. I'm like, I actually feel very welcomed right now in this meeting. Everyone has a smile on their faces. They are actively listening. No one is distracted by anything else. It feels like a really encouraging and supportive group. This is something that I've been looking for in my life, and I feel very welcomed here. And that's basically kind of how I ended it. I went into a little bit more details. Obviously, I can't remember all of it right now. But yeah, so again, that opening, explained it a little bit and wrapped it up. That is what a table topic is. Now, don't get me wrong, my table topic back then was not that perfect. I really had to think about it, and then suddenly I was like, oh, I'm being timed. I gotta answer. So yes, it is a very stressful situation, especially when you hear the question and then all of a sudden they say, Dragyn, I want you to answer that question. It's like, what? I barely had a moment to think. But that's the point of table topics. You're building on that skill to be able to just start with anything, the first thing that comes to your mind, and then find a way to structure it as you speak, as you talk about it. It's a very unique skill, something that is very, very hard to work on. But it's very important, especially for job interviews. You never know what they're going to exactly ask you. You may be given example questions or situational questions as well and things like that, and you might be able to look some of those up. But when you are actually in an interview, can you predict it? No. So table topics actually helps with that skill, your interview skills. And that's why it's my favorite part. Because most of the time, depending on the table topic master, our questions are quite silly. We had one a few weeks ago where if you could have any exotic pet, what exotic pet would you have? A way out there kind of question. But it was so much fun. I think the person answered with kangaroo, and that they would keep the kangaroo in their garage. So it's not a super serious part of the meeting. It's usually quite fun and silly and creative, and it basically lightens the mood of the meeting. As during the speaker part, or the speeches, it's quiet, it's intense, everyone's focused, everyone's listening. There's no real room for giggles, unless it's a funny speech. Because again, engaging humor is a pathway. So yes, table topics immediately sort of keeps the tension there a little bit, especially if you don't know if you're going to get called on. However, listening to people answer the usually silly questions helps a lot. The Tabletop Evaluator has a busy role. They have to listen to each speaker and give them feedback for their 1 to 2 minute speech. It is actually really hard to do. There was one meeting I went to where there were 8 of us that spoke. 8 people did table topics. Could you imagine being in charge of giving 8 people feedback for their random creative responses to random created questions? Oh boy. Our Toastmaster for that meeting was really nice about it. They were like, you know, we're supposed to do 2 to 3 minutes for feedback. We're gonna give her 4 to 5 minutes, as there were so many speakers. So there is some flexibility with the timing, especially when you're dealing with 8 people. But as I said, they're looking for a good opening, their body, their conclusion, looking at very good strategies to start off your response. Good strategies to keep going to it and adding more information, and they give really good feedback on how to end your little speech, your mini speech. It's actually very helpful. I didn't realize that there would have been a structure to this part. Everything has a structure, which is really great and helps you really organize your thinking too. So if you have a chaotic brain like mine, this is really helpful. When you realize that, oh, everything has a structure, I need to remember the structure. I need to follow the structure. So even then, this evaluation part is very good. It's usually really quick and very short. However, if you are proactive with your learning, like I am, you would reach out to the Tabletop Evaluator after the meeting sometime and ask for more specific feedback. That's what's great about Toastmasters. If you felt like you didn't get enough out of your evaluator during the meeting, they are always, most of the time, open to meeting with you or emailing you more details. So that's really great. It's just the practice of reaching out that's a little hard. Yeah, it's a little tricky. For me at least, but that's the only way to grow. So there's once that I did a table topic, and there's just so many of us again. I think still like 6 people spoke, and so the evaluator went really quickly. However, he said something about my facial expression. So I emailed him and I was like, what do you mean by facial expression? What, did I do too much, or was it too expressive? And they said, no, it was fine, but I felt like you could have done more to really emphasize how scared you were. And that helped. I was like, oh, right. So if I'm bringing in an emotion to my speech, then I really need to show it or express it. So again, feedback like that, the littlest of things, is really important to know and understand for yourself. So yes, table topics, they go through, we finish it there. Then it's the evaluation part. So we do it with the speech evaluations first, then the table topic evaluator. So it's kind of nice because they go through those 2 evaluations first, which gives the table topic evaluator time to write something down for everyone. Very good. I like that structure. Those 3 give their feedback. Then the general evaluator goes. And the general evaluator will call upon all the helpers throughout the meeting to give their report. So they ask the all counter for their report, the grammarian for their report, the timer for their report. So they will basically say, oh, the word of the day was used like 20 times in this meeting, and the person who used it the most was this. And the timer will give the exact timing for each speech, each evaluation, and for each table topic. So it's very helpful to realize, oh wow, I actually managed to speak for longer than a minute in a table topic. What? And so even that tiny little report is very helpful. And of course the all counter. I went into a spiel about that and how important it is, and yeah, it's good. So he will call, or he or she or they will call upon those roles and give their reports, and then they will give their feedback. They'll say, you know, Dragyn, as a Toastmaster, you were very organized, you brought in a lot of humor, and you related to the theme quite often. You encouraged people after they finished their roles. It was really well done, and they'd give feedback basically like that. And then at the end of the meeting, after all of that fun, crazy, chaotic speaking practice and speaking skills, we usually, if there are guests that are tuning in, so you don't have to join Toastmasters right away. You can actually observe meetings and just join clubs as a guest, just to get a feel for it. But at the end of the meeting, for warning, if you come to my Toastmasters club, we will ask you for your comments at the end. So it's always fun to hear it, because people will be like, you know, this is really interesting. I think I'll need to come by a few times to see if I can build up to joining, or if it's for me. But it's a cool group and a cool structure, and they give feedback like that. Or sometimes they'll say, this is amazing and I want to join. That was basically me. After like my second meeting, I was like, I want to join. Like, this is something I need. I want to join. And others are like, Or even after the first meeting, we've had some people who are like, I want to sign up. Who do I talk to about that? So it's amazing. So we usually get guests to comment on how the meeting went for them and what they liked and didn't like about it. Then we go through and talk about announcements and next week's program and who will be signing up for what role and who's doing their speeches and all that. Then they formally end the meeting, and then it's usually just free time after. If people have to go, they can go, or you can stick around and chat, and you know, it's pretty casual after the meeting ends. That is Toastmasters. It is intense, and you do need to dedicate time to it. And I'm finding that time is sometimes a little tricky with me, as I've got so much going on outside of Toastmasters too, but I have been motivated to do a contest in Toastmasters, like very, very soon, in 3-4 weeks. And I have a lot of work to do to get to the point where I can qualify for it. So as I've mentioned, in each pathway there are 5 levels to complete. For this contest, I need to complete 2 levels. Now I want to point out that only last week I completed my level 1. Now each level, to kind of explain it a bit more, you usually have to give 2 to 3 speeches and usually take on one of the roles that I've mentioned. So for my level 1, I had to give my Icebreaker Speech, which basically is to introduce yourself to the club. And any way you want, basically. So you can explain why you're joining Toastmasters, and you basically do what you want with it. Then I had to do another speech, 5 to 7 minutes, on any topic that I wanted. Literally any topic that I wanted. So that's where D&D speeches came in. After I gave that speech, then I received feedback, and then I had to do that same speech or a different one using the feedback I received. So already that's Icebreaker, Speech, Speech. That's 3 speeches. After I gave that second speech, I had to become an evaluator for a speech to practice giving feedback. As again, as you've heard, a very important part of Toastmasters is to give feedback and help support people in their learning. After all that, there was one more speech to do, and that was the research one, and I chose archery for that because I know very little about archery. So I had to give a 5 to 7 minute speech on archery, which was interesting, but I went really, really well, and I won Best Speaker, so that felt really good. I had no idea what I was doing, but you know, sometimes you just gotta fake it till you make it. Oh, fun times. And that was my level 1. I have to complete level 2 this month. It's a little intense, but it's not too bad. It's not as bad as giving like 5 speeches. For level 2, I have to give a speech about my communication style. So that's 1 speech. Then I need to become an active listener, which is becoming Tabletop Evaluator. So you have to listen to all of those little tabletop speeches and provide feedback to each one. So part of active listening is to make sure you're focused on the speaker, really understanding the content that they've said and stated, and making sure they have that open body conclusion. So that is something I have to do. Then I have to give a final speech for this level, and it is on being a mentor or having a mentor. So you have to give a 5 to 7 minute speech on a time that you were a protege or a mentee to a mentor. So obviously, if you've never had a mentor in your life, that level 2 could last a long time. Luckily for me, thanks to my education program, I had a mentor teacher twice in my program. So I had two options to choose from. So luckily, I'm settled. So yes, from this week, as of this week of the podcast, I've done my communication style speech. This week, I'm going to be the Tabletop Evaluator, which is exciting. I can't wait for that because I love table topics, obviously. Then the week after is my last speech, and literally that Saturday, I will have completed level 2, and that is the last day that you had to complete level 2. Crazy, right? Here's the crazy part. The week after that second speech is our club contest. Talk about cutting it close, right guys? Very, very close. So if you do the math a little bit, from the beginning of February to the beginning of March, I'm doing 3 speeches and taking on a very important role in my club. It's a lot. I'm focusing very, very, very heavily on Toastmasters this month. Hence why I figured it was time to introduce you all to Toastmasters in the podcast. Now, when I say it's a lot, it is a lot. However, you don't have to be perfect at it. You don't have to be a perfectionist. You can give an okay speech during this crazy time if you would like. Like for me, my first speech that I did, the communication styles one, I basically created a PowerPoint, presented my results, reflected on it, and called it a speech. It worked. It was organized and structured. However, I had no formal speech actually written. I was basing it off my slides. Not how I usually do Toastmasters and how I prepare for a speech. Not at all. However, for my mentoring speech and my contest speech, I am doing more memorization for those, as there will not be a PowerPoint. It will be another reflective speech about mentoring and my mentor, obviously. My contest speech, however, is about discovery a little bit. I'm not going to go into it too much, as I want to do a podcast episode on my speeches that I've done so far. So Toastmasters will be a theme for a little bit for the podcast. I hope that's okay. But I want to provide you guys with more examples of how this works. So I want to go through and actually read out maybe a couple of my speeches next episode and tell you the feedback I've gotten on them. Because I think if you guys can't do Toastmasters yourselves right now, if you're really, really busy and you can't check it out, totally fine. You can use my podcast as a way to introduce yourselves to it a little bit. So I'll read out my speeches and tell you the feedback I've received and how I use it. And that way you guys can see more of the process. This will also be true as I will read my new speeches, dun dun dun, as well in next week's episode. So next week's episode will be all about my speeches and the feedback I've received. Obviously, for the mentoring and contest speech, that you won't have the feedback for those next week, obviously, because they haven't happened yet, or they will be happening after. But if you guys would like, I will do one last Toastmasters podcast about it, maybe in the future. Maybe if I win the contest too, who knows? There might be an episode about that and that process. That's very exciting, and it's very all-encompassing. However, I am seeing the benefits. I don't think I would have done a podcast like this if I hadn't found Toastmasters. This podcast allows me to practice my speaking skills as well, to motivate you all, and part of my motivational strategies pathway, and really share this with you guys. I'm becoming a better speaker. I don't know if you guys can tell or if you've noticed, but I'm really trying to communicate a message every podcast episode. I don't know if you've caught on to it, but I'm hoping that I'm working on it and it's being effective. maybe you guys can be my evaluators and give me feedback below in the comments. Tell me how I'm doing with my vocal variety and such. Let me know. Obviously, it's not a visual podcast in the sense of webcam and eye contact, but you know, it's the little things that help people improve. Toastmasters is doing that for me on the side, and the podcast gives me more chances to practice speaking with you all. Being a good communicator in life is so important. If you find that you're struggling with certain aspects and maybe you feel like you don't have a sense of humor, maybe check out Toastmasters. You'll be surprised at the connections you make as well. Because believe it or not, it's not just speaking that we're working on. It's building supportive relationships, encouraging relationships, as well as a little bit of networking as well, getting projects started, and it's amazing where this will take you. I encourage you all, if you have the time, to check it out yourselves. See if there's a meeting in your area, or if there's an online one you can attend. I'll put the date and time and link to my club in the description as well. So you guys, if you want to check it out on Saturdays at 1:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, feel free to stop by and join. Otherwise, look forward to the next couple podcast episodes where I will read out my speeches to you all and the feedback I've received, how I've used the feedback, and really show you how the process has helped me grow in such a short period of time. That is all. Again, thank you guys so much for listening. I hope the coffee and drinks were good. And if you have any questions at all, please comment below. I will help you in any way that I can. Thank you guys so much for listening. Take care out there and see you next episode. Bye bye.